Hey everyone, apologies for hopping on late. Curriculum chat is hopping over there. I saw a bunch of y'all coming over from there, so thanks for hopping on. I'm sorry we're a little late. I'm letting people in right now. So I'll go ahead really quickly and just share sort of some housekeeping things. If you have questions, please put them in the chat box and Dan will answer them as quickly as he can. And I'm happy to help you with that too, with kind of fielding questions. I'll also say there is a survey that you'll get after this class. So please give us feedback on not just this one, but lots of classes. If you're taking more than one today, please let us know what feedback you have. Say, make those homeschool curriculum women stop talking so Dan has his full hour of talking to me. No, don't say that, just kidding. So we are excited that you're here. Thanks for joining us. And hopefully people are still hopping on, so I'm just going to keep letting people in, and Mr. Dan, you can go ahead and get started.
Okay, thank you, Jillian. It's really great to be with you all today. My name is Dan Beasley, and I'm a staff attorney with HSLDA, Homeschool Legal Defense Association. I'll talk more specifically about what we do a little bit later in the presentation, but for now, just suffice it to say that we are advocates for homeschoolers. We provide support services both on the legal side and on the practical side to help parents homeschool. Our slogan, I guess, is making homeschooling possible. So again, I'll talk a little bit more about HSLDA later on in the presentation, give you a little bit of the history of the organization and what we do. But as far as me, I'm a staff attorney here, and I've been at HSLDA as a staff attorney for about 4.5 years. And I previously worked for HSLDA as a legal assistant while I was in law school. I'm also a homeschool graduate and a homeschooling filer. So my wife and I have begun homeschooling our 4 children. And so it's been very rewarding so far, very happy with the progress the kids are making and how it's going. And looking back on my own experience, my wife is a homeschool graduate as well. We're both very grateful that our parents chose to homeschool us. So coming to you today as a homeschool graduate, homeschool dad, also a homeschool advocate. And so obviously the topic today is on the law in Tennessee. I currently monitor legislation in Tennessee. I'm very familiar with the legal landscape for homeschooling in Tennessee. I provide guidance to our member families throughout the state on how to comply with the homeschool law. So that's going to be kind of the primary focus of our discussion today, is how to get started, how to know that you're operating a homeschool program or your homeschool program in compliance with Tennessee law. But we'll also discuss some other more specifics about getting started during this challenging time that we're going through as a country. And then hopefully you'll bring some questions. So if you do have questions, go ahead and type those into the chat box. I'll try to, I believe I'll get a notification here as they come in, and I'll try to answer those. I've intentionally left a little bit of time at the end for questions, but as we go through, if you do have a question that's kind of related to a topic that I'm discussing, feel free to jump in and ask the question, and I'll answer it when I'm able to. So my goal today with the presentation, and welcome to all of you who are still joining. We hope that you enjoy the presentation today. The goal of the presentation is to provide guidance for parents who are thinking about transitioning into homeschooling, and clarity for parents who are homeschooling and want to ensure that they're doing everything that's legal, that's required from a legal perspective. We'll talk about the specific legal steps that you have to take, as well as some other recommendations. So for all homeschoolers, I want to encourage you. I want to help bolster your confidence. We certainly at HSLDA don't want anyone to decide not to homeschool out of fear or out of a concern about whether they can do this from a legal perspective. We're here to support you. And then again, as I mentioned briefly earlier, we also have practical supports as well that I'll mention briefly a little bit later on in the presentation. So we live in very interesting times, don't we, here in 2020 with the COVID-19 pandemic. And when March hit, midway through March, basically all students across the country were getting some exposure to learning at home. In one sense, everybody was homeschooling, right? You may have seen memes across the internet. I saw a number of things that made me laugh. One was, from a parent who was just beginning teaching their children at home. For your information, I'm not talking to myself. I'm having a parent-teacher conference. And another one, homeschooling day one child is suspended and the other is expelled. Another one, no school day one, 7:15 a.m. We have puzzles, activity books, stickers. We'll get through this. 8:03 a.m. Google's boarding schools with no curriculum, or excuse me, no coronavirus. These are some different tweets I saw going across the internet that made me laugh. And then one of my favorites, homeschoolers, social distancing since 1983. We've got this figured out. It caused me to chuckle due to all the stereotypes that are out there about homeschoolers and their lack of socialization. But I'm sure that you come today with questions, thinking about getting started. Maybe you have been homeschooling and you just wanted to make sure you're dotting all of your I's and crossing all of your T's. You've come to the right place. We're going to walk through the legal requirements and hopefully provide you with some encouragement along the way. Again, just in case there's anyone who missed the first intro, please feel free to ask questions, type those into the chat box. I want to address those individual questions that you have as well. Just briefly, before we jump into the substance of today's topic on the law, I just wanted to mention just kind of a high-level overview of my own experience, just because I thought it might be an encouragement to you. I was homeschooled in Nebraska, grew up in a very large family, have 8 siblings, and my parents decided to homeschool all of us, teach all of us at home. My mom was actually a physical therapist at the time and quit her job to stay home and teach us at home. And it was not as popular then as it is now. I remember when I was young, meeting people when we were out, doing different activities and everyone asking, what is this homeschooling thing? Do you have any friends? Do you do school in your pajamas? And all of these questions. And it was very unfamiliar to most people I met, I would say. And even now, as I travel some and, I work for a homeschooling organization and the topic comes up, it's like most people are pretty familiar with or aware of homeschooling. It's like they always have a relative or a cousin or a brother or sister or dog or, somebody who's involved in homeschooling in some way. So it certainly has grown. The numbers bear that out. We're up to over 2 million homeschool students across the country, probably around 2.5 million homeschool students. And again, this year, there were about 50 million homeschool students in one sense because of the coronavirus and all the schools being shut down. So the first question that we want to address, and anyway, to finish my personal story, I had a wonderful experience homeschooling. One of the benefits was that it allowed my parents to include hands-on learning opportunities for us. It allowed my parents to customize the education to the interests of each child. So my siblings have a diverse set of interests. We've got a civil engineer, we've got a mechanic, I'm a lawyer, we've got a business manager, an accountant, a social worker, a child outreach coordinator, a psychology student, and an electric motor shop apprentice. So there's a broad variety of interests, and especially as we kind of got into our high school years, my parents were able to kind of customize some particular curriculum choices that suited our strengths, our goals, and those sort of things. That was a tremendous benefit. I love the environment. I grew up in, just a loving home environment where academic proficiency was certainly encouraged, and it felt safe. It was fun. Some competitive aspects to it still with having that many siblings, but it was an excellent environment. So the individualized educational choices that my parents were able to make and provide, the hands-on learning experiences, and the wonderful environment were all tremendous benefits. I also really valued the character and the character, sort of moral values and virtue that my parents weaved into the curriculum as well. So that's a little bit about my experience. Once I finished high school, went on to eventually go to law school and then got my master's degree from Moody Bible Institute there in Chicago. And here I am at HSLDA today. So I do want to make a little bit of a distinction. I've talked about how there are 50 million homeschool students or children who are learning at home, crisis schooling, some people call it. There is a difference, though, between schooling at home and homeschooling from a legal perspective. There are also differences from a practical perspective, as more experienced homeschoolers, I'm sure, will tell you, but there's a very important difference from a legal perspective. So before we get into the specifics, I want to make sure that you know which category you're in, it, or as you make your decision, you know which category you need to be in. So are you homeschooling? Maybe you're asking the question because my children are at home. Does that mean I'm homeschooling? Three different categories that I'll present here. The first is if your school requires remote or distance learning. So if you're at home and your children were enrolled in school, public or private, before the pandemic hit, and now the school is providing some kind of packets or online learning or curriculum in some form, and that's you, that's a category where you're actually not a private homeschooler in the same category that I'm going to talk about in a moment. You do have the option to switch over into the private homeschooler category that has a specific set of laws that apply to private homeschoolers. But if your children are attending a school and had work given to them at home, and you plan to continue doing that, then the specific legal requirements that I'm going to be discussing do not apply to you. Your child is enrolled in school, you don't have to comply with the homeschool law just because they're learning at home. That's an important distinction because I don't want you to have to try to jump through different hoops and file different paperwork, and it's only going to be confusing for both you and the school officials or umbrella organizations that are trying to process your paperwork. So again, you do have the option to switch categories, of course, this fall. But if your children are going to be remaining enrolled in school, then you don't have to pay attention to the private homeschool legal requirements. Also, this doesn't apply so much anymore, but I probably for this fall, although we don't know, there's a lot of uncertainty. But if your school is closed, but your child were enrolled in school, same thing applies. As long as your children are enrolled in school and you're following the directions of that school, then you don't have to go and comply with homeschool requirements separately. So that is an important distinction. And then the third category, of course, is if you are directing your child's education at home, you're not relying on the school for curriculum. The child's really not enrolled in the school. They're enrolled in your homeschool program. Then you are a private homeschooler, and you need to pay attention to the options I'm going to talk about. Maybe you want to hop into that category. You're welcome to do so. You can do that now. You can certainly do that before this fall. And so if you're thinking about that, if you want to do that, we want to support you, we want to help you, and we want to make sure that you understand what the requirements are to move forward with that option. So am I subject to the homeschool requirements? If you're in the private homeschooling category, so your child is not enrolled in school, then yes, you are, and you do need to make sure that you follow those requirements, and that's what we're going to go over right now. So what are they? What are the homeschool requirements? Well, first, clarification, there are 50 different homeschool laws in the U.S. Each state has its own requirements for homeschooling. There's no federal homeschool law. And so I'm assuming everyone here is from Tennessee, but if you're not, then these rules don't apply to you. You would need to look into the laws of your state. And if you're moving, you would need to investigate the laws of the state that you're moving to. There are 50 different homeschool laws in the U.S. Today, we're going to be talking about Tennessee's specific legal requirements. But I will say just briefly that all states do provide parents with the opportunity to educate their children at home in the private sphere. So with that, let's jump into what is required in Tennessee. First, if your child is currently enrolled in school and you're switching to this option, you do want to make sure that you withdraw the student from their traditional school, whether that's a public school or a private school. I suggest using putting that in writing, using a formal withdraw form or letter. If your school provides one, it's okay to use that. If you're a member of HSLDA, we actually offer withdrawal forms as well that you can use to just make sure the school is aware that your child's not going to be attending there this fall. You're withdrawing them from school. We have had a few issues, not so much in Tennessee, but in some other states, surrounding states, where schools have pushed back a little bit and said, well, actually, you can't withdraw right now because of everything that's going on. It's not accurate. You can withdraw your student. Now that the school year is probably over, if I assume now for most of you, it doesn't matter if it is or isn't. You have the ability to withdraw, and really we're primarily probably looking forward to next year at this point. But I still recommend making sure it's clear that your child's not going to be attending school. You can avoid unnecessary truancy concerns. If you get a notice that your child's not attending class, or one of those electronic one of those automated calls saying that your child's missed class, that's a signal that you need to take some sort of action to make sure the school is aware of what you're doing. because it's much more difficult to resolve down the road. It's fairly easy usually to clear up those communication issues early on. If you have any questions about that, obviously, if you're a member of HSLDA, let us know. We'd be happy to take care of that for you. But if your child's enrolled in school, make sure you withdraw them. As far as what you do then to comply with Tennessee's homeschool law, you have a couple different options. This is America. We always have options for things, right? So I'm going to categorize this into 3 different options that you have to homeschool in Tennessee. The first option is the independent homeschool option. And actually, before I go into the specifics of that option, I know it feels like I'm always giving disclaimers, but I'm a lawyer, so that's what we do, right? 2 things to note. First, the information I'm going to go over is not advice necessarily for your specific situation. I'm going to go over the general rules, and it's going to apply to you, and it'll hopefully be very helpful to you. But if you have specific questions about something that's happened to you, if you've been contacted by someone, or you have a specific question, this general advice, you should contact us, for specific guidance. This information is not, I don't know the facts of your situation. This is general information that applies to everyone. And then there's also a question of, is my child, depending on how old your child is, do these requirements even apply? Do I need to actually jump through these hoops? And if your child is of compulsory school age, then the answer is yes. So how do you know if your child is of compulsory school age? Well, I'm glad you asked. We'll go over that. The compulsory school age is between 6 and 17 years of age, both inclusive. So that would mean until your child, from when they turn 6 until when they actually turn 18. And a parent who believes that their child is not ready to attend school at age 6 may actually apply to the principal of the public school where the child would attend for a 1 semester or 1 year deferral. So if your child is 6 and you're thinking, I don't really think that they're ready for a full-time load, you can actually apply and defer that for up to 1 additional year. Also, a child who's enrolled in a homeschool program can actually, and they reach the age of 17, and the truancy laws or the compulsory school attendance laws no longer apply to that child. But in general, if your child is 6, between the ages of 6 and 17, then you do need to comply with one of these options. Again, the first, I do see I have a question. Live in Virginia. We've got someone from Virginia. Okay. Well, a lot of this is not going to apply to you in terms of the specific requirements for Tennessee, unless you're thinking about moving to Tennessee. But once we're done with going over the legal requirements, we are going to talk about a few other general issues if we have time, just to address some concerns that you might have as a parent considering homeschooling. And so feel free to sign back on, but a lot of this won't apply to you if you live in Virginia, if you live out of state. So for option 1, the independent homeschool option is an option where you're actually providing your own homeschool program for your children, and you're notifying the local school district that you're going to be homeschooling, and these are the steps that you have to follow in order to do that. First is that you have to ensure that you have the required qualifications. That's just a high school diploma or a GED. So if you're looking to do the independent homeschool option, you need a high school diploma or a GED. And then next, you need to notify your local school district of your intent to homeschool. You would submit a notice of intent to the superintendent of your local school district. It's also often called the local education agency, same thing. And this is for purposes of reporting only. You don't actually have to ask for permission to homeschool. It is a notice, it's reporting, but you do have to file that notice of intent with the local school district before you begin homeschooling. It does have to include the names, number of students, the ages, grade levels of the children, the location of your school, curriculum to be offered. No particular subjects are required, but you do have to include a listing of your curriculum, the proposed hours of instruction, and your educational qualifications. Again, we just noted that that would be just a high school diploma or a GED. A notice of intent form for your use is available on the Tennessee Department of Education's website. We do include a link to that on our summary of Tennessee's homeschool law as well. So you can just go to that the Department of Education's website, print off the notice of intent form, and you would file that with your local school officials. I went over kind of a high-level view of the information that's on there, but basically you're just walking through the form and you're filling that So that's the notice of intent. So you meet the qualifications, you file your notice of intent. You also have to submit proof of immunization, that the child is immunized in accordance with the requirements for immunization, or that you have a medical or religious exemption to those immunizations. So for a medical exemption, it does have to be signed by a doctor. For a religious exemption, that could be signed by you as the parent. You just need to attach that with your notice of intent, whichever option you've chosen, the immunization record or one of those exemptions that are available in Tennessee. Next, you need to make sure that you actually teach for the required period, which is at least 4 hours per day for 180 days each academic year. This does not mean that you have to lecture to your children for 4 hours a day. It does not mean that they have to, take any particular action. It doesn't have to be formal schooling that is the same formal schooling that is provided in a traditional school, but you do have to teach for 4 hours a day. So again, that there's some flexibility in what you would consider teaching. Certainly could be more child-directed if a child's working on a math lesson or working on schoolwork, things like that. That would be considered teaching. Educational trips to the museum and so forth would be considered teaching as well. So there's flexibility in what that is. What a lot of new homeschoolers will do is pull their children out of school and try to recreate the school environment in their home. You're not required to do that. A lot of more experienced homeschoolers will tell you that's not recommended. And in some ways, it's not really the best approach. Obviously, you have a lot of freedom if to provide the program that you believe is best for your child. But what I want to make sure you take away is you don't have to follow the same setup as a traditional classroom, even though there is a requirement that you provide 4 hours of teaching each day. You have to maintain records. You have to keep attendance records, which must be available for inspection by the local superintendent and must be submitted to the superintendent at the end of each school year. The Department of Education does provide a attendance reporting form as well that's available on the Tennessee Department of Education's website. So just to recap here, since we're up to number 5, we've got ensure that you meet the qualifications. We've got submitting the notice of intent. That form's on the Department of Education's website. Include with that form your proof of immunizations. Provide the required number of hours of instruction for the 4 hours of instruction a day for 180 days during the academic year. Maintain records. And then finally, for the assessment in grades 5, 7, and 9, your child must take a standardized test administered by the Commissioner of Education, basically through the school system. So your child can actually go to the school and take the test, or you can select a standardized achievement test on your own and administer that. It's supposed to be administered by a professional testing service. Again, that's grades 5, 7, and 9. It can be administered at the school or by a professional testing service approved by the LEA. That's your local education agency. So if you're looking for somewhere else to have the test done, I would check with like a local support group, local homeschoolers to see what they do. A lot of people do use their own tests, or not their own tests, but standardized tests that are not the same as those offered in public school. You can check with your homeschoolers, and you just want to make sure that whoever you're using for the test is approved by the local education agency. If your child does not score, if your child scores basically 6 to 9 months behind, then you must submit a remedial course to the local superintendent. And the remedial course has to be designed by you and a Tennessee certified teacher who is certified or endorsed in the grade level course and subject matter for which your child is being remediated. So basically, if your child doesn't score well on the test to the point that they're 6 to 9 months behind, you've got to work with a certified teacher to put together a remediation plan. So that's the option 1. That's the independent homeschool option. I'll tell you, I actually don't think that's the most common option that's chosen by homeschooling parents in Tennessee. I don't have data to prove that, but the folks that I hear from oftentimes look to option 2. There's a little more flexibility, a little more freedom with option 2, which is the church-related school option. Church-related school is a school that's operated by a denominational, parochial, or other bona fide church organization and is accredited by a list of certain accrediting agencies that are recognized by the state. And these are not all churches. There are many church-related schools that are not, like church buildings that are offering a school. There are other denominational sort of religious schools that fall under this category. And you can certainly find, there are some websites that you can find these schools. If you're looking for one in your area, you can certainly look to the Tennessee Home Education Association. Tennessee Home Education Association, abbreviated THEA. They actually have a list of chapters. So they're broken up regionally across the state with different regions that are all a part of THEA. And they usually have contact information for church-related schools in your area. There's also a list of all the church-related schools, or at least nearly all that the Department of Education is aware of, at the Tennessee Department of Education's website. So if you're just looking for the raw data, raw listing, you can go there. If you're looking for more of a local recommendation or talking to somebody who has experience with some of these schools, reach out to THEA, the Tennessee Home Education Association. And I know that their regional directors would be happy to help you find a church-related school that may fit well with your situation. And then you would, so that's kind of step one, is investigate, find the church-related school, and then enroll your child in I'll refer to this as a CRS, that's a church-related school, and your homeschooling must be supervised essentially by the director of the CRS. So different schools have different policies on what you would need to provide or what kind of accountability there will be required. So that's why there's the selection process. You want to find a school that fits with your homeschool and your style. But enrollment in that church-related school satisfies the compliance with the compulsory school attendance law, which is a law that would require your children to attend school. And so you don't have to, take all those other steps that we talked about in option 1. So if you're doing the independent school homeschool option, you file all your paperwork with the local school, you keep your records and so forth. With the option 2, the CRS, the church-related school option, you're working more closely with the church-related school, less with, actually not at all really, with the local school district. The church-related school is required to file a notice of a report of enrollment with the local school officials of the students that are enrolled in their school, but you don't have to have ongoing, correspondence back and forth with local school officials if you're using the CRS option 2. You do have to submit proof to the church-related school that your child has been immunized or or you have one of the exemptions, the medical or the religious exemption, just like is required under option 1. But again, it doesn't go to the local school officials. It would just be for the church-related school. And then you have to comply with policies established by the church-related school. The church-related school has discretion on teacher qualification, record keeping, testing requirements. These are all established by the CRS. They may vary depending on the school that you choose and your relationship with the school. And so, again, there's a lot more flexibility under this option 2, even with regard to the testing. I know that there are some schools that don't mandate that you offer those standardized tests. You can assess your students' progress in other ways that are more helpful to you as a parent. And so complying with the policies of the school is important, but a lot of the more rigid requirements do not apply to that option 2, and that's why a lot of people choose that option. Similar to option 2 is our final option, option 3, which is enrolling in a category 3 distance learning school. And so you would, instead of enrolling in a church-related school, you would enroll in this distance learning school. And this is a school that is accredited. It's a different level of accreditation than is required for the church-related schools. In the Tennessee regulations, church-related schools are referred to as category 4 schools. Category 3 has just a different kind of accreditation. But when you enroll in one of those schools, you're basically just need to follow the policies of that school. Make sure that you're in good standing with the school. and then the school takes care of reporting your enrollment to the local school officials and the other requirements. And so again, selecting the right school that is best for you and best for your situation is important. But the rigid requirements of the option one for keeping attendance and having them available for inspection and submitting reports to the local school officials don't apply to you if you choose to comply with option two or option three. So at that point, does anyone have any questions about those three options? Independent homeschool option, where you're on your own, church-related school option, where you're enrolled in a church-related school, or option three, distance learning school, where you're enrolled in a category 3 distance learning school. Make sense? Just make sure that you pick one of those and comply with the requirements, enrollment or filing your notice of intent, depending on which option, before school starts, and you'll be well on your way to homeschooling in the state of Tennessee. So what are some of the other issues? I don't see any questions. Feel free to ask those as they come up, but otherwise we'll just keep plowing along. What else? What other recommendations do we have for getting started beyond the legal aspect of making sure that you filed the right paperwork and you've selected the right option? We already talked about making sure that you've taken steps to withdraw a student from their previous school if they were enrolled for this last year, to make sure that you avoid any unnecessary truancy issues. The next step that I always suggest is talk to other homeschoolers in your area. Find out what they're doing, find out what has been helpful for them in their homeschooling journey. Sometimes it can feel, you may feel like this is a new decision and you feel alone and you're looking for support. I know that there are lots of homeschoolers probably in your area who would love to come alongside of you and share some of their experiences and support you in your homeschooling journey. So reach out to homeschoolers in your area, find out the local recommendations for museums and that kind of thing. It's a recommendation that we have to just plug into your homeschooling community. Explore your child's learning preferences, your teaching style, and your educational approach. There's a lot of variety. Just a short story. My wife and I, as I mentioned, have started homeschooling our children. And a couple of years ago, before we officially started, we went to one of these big homeschool conventions, and we were walking around and we're looking at all this curriculum. And we went there intending to, pick out the curriculum that would be best for us and our family. And again, we're both homeschool graduates, so we have some of the experience. But when we were growing up, there were only a couple different curriculum options, especially compared to what is available today. We were overwhelmed by the number of options. And, there were all these curriculum providers, and they all had their little pitch on, why they were going to be the best for our students and our family. And we were overwhelmed. We just took a step back and said, we're going to have to think about this a little bit. We can't make a decision today. We need to do some more research. And I do just want to give a little plug here for our education consultants. So we have on staff here at HSLDA education consultants who can talk with you, who can understand your situation, and then make some recommendations on curriculum choices that are best for you and your situation. It's individualized guidance that is invaluable. You can read a lot, you can do a lot of research on the internet and read different people's opinions, but there's a lot of value in talking with somebody who has homeschooled and who is familiar with the different options that are available and can make a smaller number of choices and help you in making that decision. Also, I'll just refer back to what I just said in talking with other local homeschoolers in your area. Try not to be overwhelmed because there's a lot out there, and just take it one step at a time. Pick out a curriculum that you think looks good, that you think meets with your child, meet your child's needs, and try it out. And realize that you're not locked into any of this. You're not locked into the same curriculum. You're not even locked into homeschool. Maybe you're thinking, I don't know if I want to do this for the next 12 years. That's okay. You can take this 1 year or even one semester at a time. Just because you begin the year homeschooling doesn't mean you have to stick with it. If you're thinking about it, we're here to support you. There are homeschoolers who are here to support you if you want to give it a try. And you don't have to feel like, again, you're locked in or you've signed some sort of contract that you're going to be doing this for the rest of your life. Or for the rest of your child's educational experience. So talk with homeschoolers in your area, explore your child's, and our consultants can help you talk about that too, but some of it's going to be you learn as you go. You learn about their learning styles, their preferences as you get into it. Maybe that's not all clear to you, and that's okay. Take the next step, find the curriculum that you think is going to work, and then start using it and see how it works. decide where you want to homeschool in your home, and then create a schedule. And again, realize that this is all flexible. You can change, you can switch things around, and learn as you go, and seek feedback from people that you trust. And our organization is certainly here to help you with that. And then try to enjoy the learning process. One of the things, as my wife and I have talked about homeschooling, one of the top recommendations that she shares with people is just give yourself some grace, focus on connecting with your child, get advice from people who are kind of further ahead of you in the homeschooling journey. But some days are going to be beautiful, and some days you're going to want to quit, and that's okay. Our opinion is it's definitely worth it, but it's not to say that it's all super easy. So don't get frustrated if it seems very challenging, especially at first. One quote that my wife refers to often is, "The days are long, but the years are short." And so connecting with your child, maximizing the opportunities that you have to invest in their education, to see them learn, it's very rewarding, but it's not always easy. So give yourself some grace, and then celebrate your child's growth and achievement. I love seeing my 8-year-old just get so excited, when she finishes a book, and we usually do a little outing for ice cream or something when they finish a book. And just celebrating those little milestones is something I think that can get lost in the big picture when we're really focused on making sure, we want our children to learn, we want them to be well educated and well adjusted in society and have good character and all of this. And sometimes it's easy to blow past those little milestones. And so give yourself some grace, celebrate the little achievements. And again, find homeschoolers in the area who you can find support from, who are further ahead of you, who can offer more specific recommendations as well. So those are my tips for getting started. Few other points of encouragement here. I'm watching the time as well, but we got about 15 minutes to go over some other concerns, maybe some thoughts that you might have as you're sorting through this decision, or as you're going to get questions from family and so forth. Why are you doing this homeschooling thing? There's a recent study out by Lindsay Burke with the Heritage Foundation, and she did a survey of the 38 most prominent studies on homeschool, the academic outcomes of homeschool students. So it's focused on academic achievement and the academic outcomes, and she reviewed 38 different studies, the most prominent that contributed to the literature on the research in this area. And the results were overwhelmingly positive. That the conclusion was very clear that homeschooling does contribute to positive academic outcomes for students. So there's been research that's done. There's been quite a bit of research done on homeschooling, and so far the results are very positive. That homeschooling is an effective tool at teaching a child to learn. That's also reflected in ACT and SAT scores. It's also reflected in studies that have looked at college GPAs for students that were homeschooled. It's also reflected in the number of students that graduate from college. So if you're thinking about it and have concerns about whether this works, or if you have family members or critics who are wondering what you might be doing to your children if you decide to homeschool, know that it's been done for several decades now in our country. There's a fair amount of research on it, and it's positive. It is an effective tool. So what are some other common concerns that are out there? What about college? Over a decade ago, the Chronicle of Higher Education reported that homeschool students had been accepted to over 700 colleges and universities in America, including some of our most prestigious institutions like Harvard, Yale, Stanford, etc. Homeschoolers are going to college, are not having issues going to college. There are occasionally hiccups, and this is one thing that our organization does, is we do help homeschool graduates who face additional hurdles or who face discrimination based on the fact that they were homeschooled. Your student can receive federal financial aid. They can enlist in the military. They absolutely can get a job, but that's not to say that there are no issues. And one of the things that we do is we are here to support homeschool graduates who do face that pushback. We're still working in that area. We're working legislatively to improve both regulations and statutes that cause some problems occasionally for homeschool graduates. But I didn't personally have any problems. Most of the homeschool graduates that I know did not. When those problems come up, though, we are here to support your graduate and assist them with the issues that may arise. Again, sometimes it's questions about documenting a high school diploma because it comes from the parent. Sometimes background checks will look at that. Background check companies will look at that and go, wait a minute, this diploma was from the parent. It's absolutely okay, but you might get pushback. And again, if you do, think of HSLDA. I hope you'll join us as a member, and you can give us a call, and we work on those kinds of issues all the time when they do pop up. All branches of the U.S. military welcome homeschool students. They can enlist. 3 things that you'll want to keep to make sure if you have high school students. Again, I don't know where everyone's at, so if you got young students, I'm not trying to overwhelm you. But if you have high school students that are looking at possibly military enlistment or college admission, there are 3 things I recommend. Make sure they have a high school diploma. Issue them a diploma. You can sign it yourself. Some of the church-related schools, the CRSs, will issue diplomas, but you can absolutely do it yourself as the parent. So issue a diploma and have a transcript. A transcript is even more important in the homeschool context because the diploma is not from the state. And so someone looking at the diploma goes, okay, this is great. It shows high school completion. What does that mean? What was included in this high school program? So the transcript has increased importance because it actually shows the credits, it shows the courses that your student completed during in your high school program. And then the final thing is proof of compliance with state law. You need to be able to document that your program was in compliance with one of the 3 options that we talked about earlier. If you have those 3 things, if you have a professional looking diploma, it's signed by you as the parent. If you have a transcript signed by you as the parent, some people get them notarized, not necessary, can be helpful, but it should be professional. It should be typed out. It should look good. Sometimes it's form over substance with bureaucratic institutions. So diploma, transcript, and then documented compliance with state law. In Tennessee, that would be proof of your enrollment in your church school or proof that you filed your notice of intent. And I suggest, I should have mentioned this earlier, if you choose option 1 and you file that notice of intent, keep a copy. Keep it in your records. You want to be, especially for high school. I recommend keeping those high school records. Just what I mentioned, the diploma, the transcript, and the proof of compliance with state law. And forever. Because I have helped homeschool graduates who, are in their 30s and graduated over a decade ago, and they're trying to change jobs, and there's some silly requirement that a background check company is looking through and saying, well, what's going on with your, we have this minimum requirement where you have to have a high school diploma, and your diploma is from your parent, and we don't know what this is about. And having the proof that your program was in compliance with state law is invaluable to making sure that those issues don't come up. So I really stress that a lot. Make sure that you issue a diploma, make sure you have the transcript, make sure you keep copies of compliance with so that you can verify compliance with state law. Keep that in a folder, put it in your safe or in your filing cabinet, but just make sure you hold on to it. So that's for high school graduates. If you've got younger children, I do recommend keeping records to document that your child's receiving an education in compliance with state law for at least 2 years. So that at any time, if someone were to raise a question or you're trying to, participate in a particular program where you have to document compliance with state law, if you have proof for 2 years that you've been teaching and the child's been, some kind of an attendance record, people do this in different ways. If you're under option 1, we already talked about, there's a specific form that you'll want to use. If you're in option 2 or 3, church-related school or the accredited, the category 3 school may have something for you, but it may just be up to you. In terms of the format of how you're documenting attendance. That's okay. Some people use a calendar and just mark off the days. Some people use a journal where they just jot a brief summary of what they did that day. Others will have a start date, an end date, block off vacation time, and just kind of have a high level summary and then note any changes as they go through the year, that kind of thing. All of those things are fine, but it is recommended that you just be able to document that education is taking place should something come up. If someone wants to challenge the legality or the legitimacy of your homeschool program. Another recommendation I have is to take action and prepare to protect homeschooling freedom. One of our missions here at HSLDA, our primary mission really is to make homeschooling possible by protecting the freedom to homeschool. Some of you have probably seen some of the news lately about a Harvard conference on to discuss really restricting and homeschooling, and a law professor at Harvard, Professor Elizabeth Bartholet, has proposed in the Arizona Law Review article a presumptive ban on homeschooling, and that kind of thing doesn't have any impact on its own in terms of your ability to homeschool, but it can affect legislators who may be considering policy, who may be considering restrictions on the ability to homeschool, sometimes just adding requirements to homeschooling. We are watching those kinds of things at HSLDA, but I encourage you to take just a couple simple steps to help preserve the freedom to homeschool. And this is what I recommend. First, I recommend finding out who your legislators are, who your elected officials are. You may not know, and that's okay. You can go to our website, or you can go to your state's website, just put in your address, and it will show you who your legislator is. If you want to use our site, you got to go to our Legislative Action Center. So you go to our homepage, which is www.hslda.org, and then click on our under the legal heading, there's Legislative Action Center. You can click on that, and you'll be able to enter your address and find out who it is, or just go to the Tennessee Legislature's website. But find out who your legislator is, so that you know if something comes up that would affect homeschoolers, you know who that person is. And then second, I encourage you to contact them. I encourage folks to, if you're close, even schedule a visit and make it a civics lesson and talk with your kids about the legislative process and how laws are made. And, just even if you don't have to have any particular proposal that you're, want to talk with them about, or some particular policy you're trying to push or change. Just saying, hey, I'm one of your constituents and we'd like to meet you, talk with you. Most legislators are more than happy to do that. They love talking with your kids. And you can just give them and the third thing, so find out who your legislator is, contact them, introduce yourself, and tell your story. Make sure that they understand what homeschooling is really about, that you're a parent who's really interested in your child's education. You want them to learn, and you want them to be well educated and be able to adjust well into society, and you feel that this is the best educational option for your particular student. Nobody knows a child better than that child's parent. And so sometimes legislators, they read negative coverage of homeschooling, which pops up occasionally in the media. And if that's their only experience with homeschooling is sort of a negative spin that they've read about, they don't know people who are actually homeschooling, they're going to be inclined to make decisions based on what they know. And so I encourage you to just meet your legislators, talk with them, and help them have a accurate impression of homeschooling. The way that Elizabeth Bartlett writes in her law review article, it's pretty clear to me that she just doesn't have a very accurate view of the vibrant homeschooling movement today and the families that are homeschooling. So those are some just tips on the legislative piece. Just want to spend a couple minutes here before we wrap up talking about HSLDA and what we do. I've mentioned some of the things throughout the presentation, but if you do have any questions, now's a great time to type those in. I'd be happy to address those questions that you have. But just a little bit of history about HSLDA. HSLDA was founded in 1983 to meet two critical needs of the homeschooling community. One was a need for legal representation, and the second was for it to be affordable. And those typically don't go hand in hand, right? An affordable lawyer, what is that? But at the time in 1983, it really wasn't clearly legal to homeschool in every state. In most states, in fact, it wasn't clearly legal. And in some states, families were being criminally prosecuted for homeschooling. And so HSLDA was started to meet those critical needs that the homeschooling movement had. Based on a membership model, families could join HSLDA, and then the families that did need help would receive legal representation from lawyers who were familiar with homeschooling, were familiar with the arguments used to advance homeschooling, and then there was no cost to that family because they were a member of HSLDA, and everyone was kind of standing together to pay the membership dues. And so that was the beginning of HSLDA. We still provide that same legal service today. So if your right to homeschool would ever be questioned, if you have a government official who's contacting you about your ability to homeschool, we are here to help, even if it's just simple guidance, making sure you file the right forms, as we kind of covered some of that today. If it's more serious, if it's your graduate, we're here to work on homeschooling issues and make homeschooling possible. Those services are still available today. Since then, though, obviously homeschooling is widely recognized today. It's 100% legal in every state. The requirements, of course, vary, as we talked about earlier, but it's recognized. And so we've expanded our services as well to include practical support through our education consultants who can, again, talk with you about curriculum. We mentioned that earlier, can talk with you about learning styles, Maybe you're just going, I'm getting started and I just need somebody to help show me the ropes or make specific recommendations based on how things are going in my home. They're happy to listen to your situation and make those recommendations for you. We get excellent reviews from our consultants. It's all included in your membership. You don't have to pay any additional fees. And these are professionally trained educators who are also homeschooling parents or who have experienced homeschooling. And so they are happy to talk with you and assist you with the situation. Another service that we are providing, the third sort of primary service, is the advocacy at the legislative level. I already mentioned earlier that we're watching legislation in all 50 states that would affect homeschoolers. We will defend and notify folks against added restrictions on homeschooling, against threats to the ability to homeschool. But we're also working on just crafting good policy for homeschool students, for homeschool graduates, to help pave the road to their on their pathway to success on their given, whatever their given career choice is. There are just a few issues in different areas that we're still working on in that area, especially like civil service positions oftentimes have some requirements that cause problems when a homeschool is not accredited, which is not required to be. And so sometimes that's just an example of where we're working with legislators to try to remove that roadblock from homeschool graduates' pathway to success. And then finally, we just serve as a nationwide resource for homeschoolers, for legislators, for the media who may have questions about homeschooling. We're here to advocate for it in the court of public opinion as well. And so joining HSLDA gives you the opportunity to stand with homeschoolers across the country and really around the world who are excited about homeschooling and who are advocating for homeschool freedom. We have what I would consider more minor benefits as well, like a perks discount program where you can get, we've negotiated discounts with different vendors. You can get a teacher ID card where you can get teacher discounts at different retailers. And so I encourage you to visit our website and check out some of our more extensive resources like that. But those are the primary services and resources that we provide our member families. Does anybody have any questions? Seeing none, the last thing I'll highlight is that we do have a new website, kind of a microsite that we put together called, it's www.mompossible.org, And at that website, it's designed for parents who are kind of forced into a situation where they're considering homeschooling or found themselves considering homeschooling in light of the pandemic, in light of everything that's been going on with our traditional education system. It's designed for you. It's designed to provide you with support, little helpful videos and links and resources to kind of help you find your footing, to make that decision. So I just want to highlight that as a resource because there are a lot of folks who are thinking about homeschooling right now because their children have been home, because schools are still deciding what they're going to do this fall, or because the online learning hasn't, or the distance learning hasn't been working out well. Homeschooling is different from that. Kind of started out with that. When you're homeschooling privately, you're in the driver's seat. You get to make curriculum choices. You get to set your schedule. The student doesn't have to be in front of the computer all day. It can be more hands-on. It can be more interactive. You're in the driver's seat. In the more crisis schooling model or schooling at home model where students have been at home in light of the pandemic, that's different. You're bound by the requirements of whatever the school is that they're enrolled in, and you have to follow those requirements or or face the legal consequences. So if you're in that situation and you're looking at your options, consider homeschooling privately. If you're looking for support, certainly reach out to HSLDA here. We would be happy to assist you, support you, answer your practical questions, and give you legal guidance as you consider homeschooling. Thank you all for joining me today. That's all I have. And if you have some questions, feel free to type them into the box. Otherwise, I'll turn it back over to Jillian.
Can you see, I was going to look and see, I think some people have sent questions to me privately maybe.
Oh, okay.
Here. So, Autumn.
Oh my goodness, okay.
See, maybe.
Okay, I see. Somehow was not looking at the right box. I do see some questions. Excellent. Okay, what is, let's see. We live in a city school district. The kids are going to county schools.
I think
I was muted.
Dan,
Sorry
there you
about that. Sorry about that. On the question about where to send paperwork, whether it's the city school district or the county school district, if your child would attend the county schools, you would want to send it to the governing authority, the local education agency that supervises those schools. Because the schools where they're attending would be that helps you figure out the attendance area. And then, so it'd be the governing body. So if there's a county school district and they would attend county schools, then that's where you would. It's really the local education agency. If you're not sure, you could contact your local. This would be for option one, but you could contact your local school and just make sure that your address, because especially if you're close to the boundary, it's not a bad idea just to make sure that you know which boundary area you live in and which local education agency you need to send the paperwork to. But it's the local education agency, it's the superintendent of that school district that governs the school that your child would attend based on your attendance area, based on your address. We have a 5.5-year-old who's advanced, officially starting school in September. Can we start him off in first grade, or is it mandatory to begin with kindergarten? You can start him off in first grade. One of the benefits of homeschooling is it allows you to teach to your child's strengths and to teach where they're at, and so no reason to hold them back in kindergarten if they're ready to start in first grade. Do you still have to test if you are a member of an umbrella school? No, it's not legally required. You just want to check with your umbrella school. If they require testing, then yes, you would, but the law does not require you to do it if the umbrella school does not require you to do it. Would that include Home Life Academy? Yes, I am familiar with Home Life Academy. They do not mandate testing. It's certainly something that you can do, but it's not mandated or required. Is an umbrella school a CRS? Yes, umbrella school is kind of a more informal terminology, typically referring to the same thing, although umbrella school could also include the Category 3 distance learning school that we talked about. So, church-related school or CRS would be an umbrella school, but there may be other options as well, like an option 3 school. You can't see our questions. Yeah, it must have been obvious because I apologize for that. Is the notice of intent a yearly requirement? Yes, it is. Under option 1, you would file that directly with your local school officials, or again, the local education agency, the superintendent. And in the other options, option 2 or option 3, you would need to renew your enrollment each year, and that school is going to send the notice to the local school officials. Okay, I think that was the. Do you still have to test if you are a member of an umbrella school? Okay, we covered that one. Is an umbrella school a CRS? Yes. Do 5th, 7th, and 9th graders still do the standardized testing if we go through Home Life Academy? Not required. You don't have to. Can you give the name again who wrote that study? The study that I referenced about the academic outcomes of homeschool students was Lindsay Burke of the Heritage Foundation. I think that's the study. If that's not the study you're referring to, please go ahead and type it in the chat box again. I'll get it. But that would be Lindsay Burke. She worked with HSLDA on doing the literature review. Can you host an event like this for New York residents soon? We likely can. Now, I personally do not work extensively in New York. One of my colleagues does that. We have 8 attorneys on staff here, and we've divided up the country and have different work areas. But my colleague, TJ Schmidt, I'm sure would be happy to put together something like this for the state of New York. About public school sports teams or drama or classes like art, do my kids who are enrolled in New Hope Academy have a right to attend? I have heard mixed things. Will homeschool kids be required? That's the first question. Regarding public school access, it's a great question. We didn't cover it in detail today. The short answer is for sports, yes, they actually do have the ability to participate in sports. According to the Tennessee Activities Association bylaws, homeschool students are eligible. And there is some confusion on that point in terms of what's required. You do basically have to make sure that you're in compliance with the law and that the local school authority, the local education agency, has the report of students showing that your student is enrolled if you're not homeschooling under the independent school option. It used to be, a little bit of a historical note, and this could be what's contributing to the confusion. It used to be that you had to enroll in an independent school. You had to use that option 1, independent homeschool option, if your child was going to participate in sports. That's no longer the case. You can participate in sports even though you're enrolled in a CRS, but you do just have to be able to document that the child is enrolled. And so the CRS would, I mean, they're supposed to be sending the notice to the local the local education agency. You might just want to make sure that they're doing that. Will homeschool kids be required to send in proof that they've received COVID-19 vaccines if they become available? No, not unless the law changes so that the COVID-19 vaccine is required. So if that were to be added to the list of vaccines that were required, then of course it would depend on that legislation. If it's just added to the list, you would still have the available exemptions for medical or religious reasons. But as of now, there would not be a requirement that homeschool students, get the vaccine. I know there's some legislation as well currently being considered that would affect that some people have raised some concerns about it's really designed to address the liability of schools this fall, and limits the liability of a school and even some individuals for some of the different versions. There have been various amendments offered, and again, it's not finalized yet. This is in consideration. But the idea would be to extend some liability, to limit the liability for schools for a student who may have contracted COVID-19, and there's a presumption that if they follow recommendations, that there's a presumption that they're not liable. And the limitation has to do with the standard. Now I'm kind of getting into legal parlance between negligence and so forth. But to suffice it to say, some people are concerned that may cause more schools to require the vaccine. But again, that doesn't change the law that mandates you as a parent to do it. It's kind of a separate issue.
Okay, friends, so sorry.
Okay, we're out of time. No worries.
So sorry to cut everyone off. We're going to hop over to the working and homeschooling session. So, Dan, if they want to get a hold of you later, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, shoot me an email if you have questions. It's easy, just Tennessee, all spelled out, at HSLDA.org. Tennessee at HSLDA.org. And I'll just address the membership question. You don't have to get a separate membership for each child. It's a family membership, if you're interested.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me, and I apologize for missing those questions. I wish I could have covered them all. Just shoot me an email and I'll get back with you if you didn't get your question answered.
Perfect.
Thank you, Jillian.
Yes, thank you.